Mr. Speaker, I'm the first one speaking from the backbenchers from the class of 2025 from the PAP. Thank you for this opportunity. Before I begin, I declare my interest as Deputy Group Managing Director of Commonwealth Capital Group. We are a Singaporean global enterprise operating businesses across the food value chain, from cold chain logistics to food manufacturing and to food services. Collectively, our businesses steward more than 1,000 livelihoods, and we provide nourishment to thousands of Singaporeans daily. Mr. Speaker, I support the motion of thanks to the President. Let me also thank our residents of Jalan Besar, GRC and Whampoa for their support for me and my teammates. Dr. Wan Rizal and Ms. Denise Phua spoke earlier. I was introduced only in April this year, just 1 month before the general election. I'm grateful for their trust in me. This trust will not be misplaced. I will do my best to do our residents of Jalan Besar, GRC and Whampoa proud and give them a voice in Parliament. Now, I have been a civil servant for more than a decade, and I've had the pleasure to be involved in previous speeches by the President at Parliament's opening. Invariably, the speeches cover the following themes. 1, the world is a dark and dangerous place. 2, the economy is a solution to many of our problems. 3, we need to address the challenges of an aging population. 4, we need to build an inclusive society. And 5, we need to keep Singapore united. These themes were from the 2025 speech. But if you thought these themes were from the 2023, 2020, 2018, 2016, 2014, or 2011 speeches, you would also be right. That is not to say the President's speech was boring, nor is it an indictment of the speech writers. Rather, it demonstrates that our challenges are enduring. However, I submit that below the surface of these high-level challenges, there are emerging trends within each theme that require us to rethink and reimagine our policies in this term of government. I will spend the rest of my speech to share some thoughts about these trends and, importantly, their implications. First, the international economic order has changed permanently. Bridges have been replaced by barriers. Our earlier economic growth strategy was premised on foreign MNC investments riding the wave of globalization, which enabled firms to headquarter in Singapore, while the bulk of markets and operations would be outside the country. But now foreign MNCs, even if they want to invest in Singapore, may find themselves torn between other geopolitical considerations. Manufacturing investments are being onshored in other countries. And because headquarters are increasingly sited nearer to manufacturing or nearer to markets, Singapore is actually at a disadvantage. I think it is therefore critical to have a renewed policy focus on growing our own Singaporean MNCs that are more deeply rooted in Singapore. Yes, we can press on with anchoring investments from foreign MNCs. My former colleagues at the EDB do a valiant job. I myself spent a couple of years at the EDB looking at how to grow our Singaporean MNCs. And now, I lead a local company that aspires to be an MNC one day. Based on these experiences, I am convinced that our policies can do more to support our local firms to scale beyond the SME level, to grow above the current SME threshold of 100 million in annual revenues, to become MNCs closer to 1 billion in annual revenues or more. Perhaps the government should consider supporting a new class of local enterprises that are larger than SMEs, but smaller than your billion-dollar listed companies. These are some issues that I hope to explore as part of my role in the GPC for Trade and Industry. Second, the technological cycle has shortened significantly. AI, which many members have spoken about, represents a step increase in technological advancement. Some have likened this to the discovery of the steam engine that catalyzed the Industrial Revolution and disrupted many jobs. But even before AI, the pace of job creation and destruction felt like it was already accelerating. Make no mistake. This means that skills will become obsolete faster. Today, we can no longer rely on what we learned in full-time education to carry us on to retirement. Perhaps there may even come a point in time when what we learn in the first year of tertiary education will become irrelevant by the time we graduate. We see this manifest in greater anxieties amongst our new graduates and our older PMETs. I've spoken to many in Jalan Besar and Whampoa, and I feel for them. What does this imply for the direction of government policy? Many members have actually spoken up about this. Mr. Andre Loh gave the suggestion of the redundancy insurance scheme. I appreciate him for raising that idea. I agree with the intent that it is about reducing the anxieties that many of our workers feel. However, I respectfully disagree in the implementation of that idea for two reasons. The first is that we've just implemented a job seeker support scheme. The SMS for Manpower has spoken about this earlier. It's still early days, but our residents are already benefiting. The scheme provides the support required for our workers to get the assurance they need if they fall into redundancy for a targeted group. The second reason is because I'm not sure whether the numbers add up. Let me explain. I looked at the suggestion in quite some detail. The member suggested that if you contribute 0.1% of your monthly wage, you would have enough in the insurance pool to cover the redundancy payouts. From a back-of-envelope calculation, 0.1%, which he said was about $5, grossed up to a year, which is $60, grossed up to the whole population of 2.5 million Singaporean workers, that gets us to about $150 billion of collections for the insurance pool. However, I'm not sure whether that's enough, because in the job support scheme, the Ministry of Manpower's budget was already 200 billion, and this was for a targeted group of unemployed individuals. So a national unemployment or national redundancy insurance scheme should cost more and not less. However, I think the greater point is that there are other ways in which we can resolve this issue. I believe we should pivot our policies towards a greater emphasis on employer-led training and away from broad-based skills future initiatives. Do more to help employers give workers jobs and then train them on the job. We call these place and train programs. The logic is simple. The best place to pick up relevant skills is in the workplace, working for best-in-class companies, hopefully local companies, that are closest to the market and closest to the frontier of innovation. Businesses can be incentivized to hire Singaporeans and then train and retrain them in those jobs. The government can help through expanding time-limited wage subsidies for new hires. And Singaporeans will benefit because they have the assurance of a job first before they commit to training. The Graduate Industry Traineeships, or GRIT program, is a step in that direction. If I had it my way, I would call it the Graduate Employment Assistance Through Training Program, or the GRATE program. I'm glad to be able to look into this further in my role on the GPC for Manpower. Third, extreme longevity will raise new questions for town planning and policy making. For the first time in our history, there are now 2 generations in retirement at the same time. In Whampoa, I encounter someone above 90 years old at almost every block visit, and quite regularly, someone above the age of 95. I think it's the same for many members of this House. I see the future complexion of Singapore in Jalan Besar and Whampoa. Our town planning assumptions will have to change. Looking ahead, we will need to design our towns for the extreme user, the 90-year-old, not just a 70-year-old. A 10-minute walk means very different things for these two individuals. At Whampoa, our ramps on our overhead bridges are increasingly useless. My elderly residents tell me that it is too tiring to walk up the ramps. And if we don't plan ahead to build lifts and other infrastructure early enough, we will end up isolating many of our oldest seniors. And this will be a growing problem with senior frailty. It also means that the provision of senior care and other social support services may need to be more distributed in the neighborhood, even if it means a less efficient model. Beyond planning, our policies will also have to be updated. We cannot make policies assuming that all those above 65 are a single monolithic block with the same needs. The government has acknowledged this in its packages for the Pioneer generation and the Merdeka generation. And I believe there will be a need for another package in this term for a subset of these seniors. Mainly because after a certain age, perhaps 85, they would all have lived beyond what they expected to live when they first retired. None of them would be automatically included in CPF Life. Not all would have silver support. But almost all of them would be anxious about the cost of living, and they would not be able to benefit directly from the higher wages that the strong economy may bring. Can we therefore contemplate a more broad-based level of assurance, perhaps an expanded silver support scheme for the oldest 5% of our population? Fourth, the work to build a more inclusive society is far from complete. The new challenge of this generation is to address wealth inequality. It is no longer just about income inequality or the inequalities of starting points in life. Earlier terms of government focus on equalizing opportunities for young and improving wages of our lower wage workers. This is no doubt important, and I strongly support it. But an important assumption here was that incomes and education would continue to be the best way to close the gaps in life outcomes. But what if this assumption turns out to be only partially true? We are already seeing early signs that wealth inequality is becoming worse. And if we don't address this fast enough, it will threaten to divide society. We will be broken into a million pieces, and we can't go back. At my weekly MPS sessions, some residents struggle with affording a basic HDB rental flat. I regularly appeal to lower the rent of these rental flats. At the same time, my constituency set the record for the most expensive DBSS flat transaction at more than $1.5 million. That's more than 100 years of rent for the HDB rental flat. Just think about that. And I don't even have landed properties in my area, where many have complained about higher property taxes. With smaller family sizes, wealth will get passed down to fewer children and could become increasingly concentrated. I worry when I hear people say that the only way to be rich in Singapore is to be born rich. If the greatest predictor of wealth is who your parents are, then I think we have a big problem. Now, if we are serious about addressing the issue, then perhaps our fiscal system should be used as a means to reduce wealth inequality. How can we ensure that the returns to labor and effort exceed the returns to other assets, such as real estate investments? How can our asset tax system, including property tax, be even more progressive? And how can we build a more effective form of wealth redistribution? On that note, we actually have some interesting learning points with our CDC vouchers, which are universal and have provided some basic level of assurance. I was privileged to have had the chance to work on the CDC voucher scheme at the MOF as a civil servant, and I look forward to interrogate these big questions in my role on the GPC for Finance. Let me now conclude on the last theme, keeping Singapore united. Since the general election, I have seen an upswell of interest to volunteer in my community of Whampoa and Jalan Besar, especially amongst our youth. I cherish this dearly. It makes me very optimistic about our future because it shows that Singaporeans, especially the next generation, cares not just about themselves, but about others in the community. These are the first fruits of a we-first society. And over time, I hope we will even move towards becoming a you-first society. A society where Singaporeans are more other-centered and put others first, not only because they identify as belonging to the same community or the same we, but simply because putting others first is the right thing to do as human beings. I have witnessed firsthand how strong community bonds can overcome local challenges. Neighbors helping other neighbors in times of need, fighting fires together, carrying less mobile seniors down the staircase to evacuate a flat. And I hope that as the government makes policies at the national level, we will also do more to encourage the building of these local community bonds at the local level. One thing I've learned as a new MP is that no community can be fully served by our national policies or our government agencies. There will still be gaps in the last mile of policy delivery. So we will always need a strong community to make sure that the gaps are filled and that the last, the lost, the least, and the lonely are taken care of. This is not something that I came up with myself. This is something that my wife, who coincidentally celebrates her birthday today, always reminds me about. And when our communities are strong and united, our country will likewise be strong and united. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I support the motion and wish the government and all civil servants the very best in delivering on the policy agenda. Thank you.